Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew Griffiths here. How are we doing? Welcome. I appreciate you coming along. Hopefully everyone can hear okay. Hopefully we're coming through loud and clear. We're using some new technology here. We're using the Zoom webinar platform. And as always, there's a few teething problems and learnings to be had. Anyway, hopefully we're coming through, or I'm coming through loud and clear at this stage. And we've got a full house booked in for today's webinar. And obviously there's a lot of interest in the topic that we've got there. And I'd just like to say, before we get started on this, I really appreciate you making the time to tune in. I always believe that now more than ever as entrepreneurs, we need to commit time and energy to learning new stuff. And from my experience, it's those people who actually make the time to learn new stuff are the ones who have been the most successful. You know, I find that I'm spending a number of hours each week that I'm committing and devoting to figuring out how to do things, learning new things and doing all that. So I really admire you for doing it. I know everyone's busy, so how about we get into it? And that leads me on to today's topic, of course. And it's all about podcasting, the good, the bad, and the ugly. An extraordinarily interesting kind of a topic as well, which has fascinated me, how many people have contacted me, it booked out in a heartbeat, all the rest of it. So there's a lot of discussion around it generally. And certainly it's a marketing medium that's been considered by a lot of people. What I find particularly intriguing, though, is the fact that it's so hot. All of a sudden, everyone is talking podcasting. Like, where did it come from? It's not new. We've been doing podcasts. Well, podcasts have been around for years now, it seems like. They're almost old school. In fact, in many respects, they're kind of boring. I'm a little bit surprised that that it kind of revamped all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere. And I'm intrigued by why it's hot. Absolutely, totally intrigued. There's lots of podcasts out there. I mean, I'm on the Small Business Big Marketing show doing funny business with the podcasting guru, of course, Mr. Timbo Reid. And I know what a wonderful medium it is, but I also see now Tim Ferriss, someone who we all know is doing extraordinary stuff in the podcasting space, basically going online for an hour, getting drunk and talking. But there's all these other types of things going on. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of why it's so hot at the moment, but also, answer all the kind of questions. And I think that's the interesting thing for me. Whilst I actually get interviewed a lot for podcasts, I've got 5 interviews this week alone that I'm being interviewed for podcasts, all of a sudden out of the blue. I know nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. I'm an idiot. It's a big topic. And I think that we all kind of want some of these questions answered. So I figured the best way to do this was to actually get someone who knows what they're doing, who's perhaps new in the podcasting space and is achieving some great stuff. So I would like to introduce you to Mr. Ronsley Vaz. Are you there, Ronsley?
What's up, Andrew? How's it going?
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Fantastic, mate. Fantastic. What about yourself?
Very well, thanks, Ronsley. Very well. Folks, just let me tell you a little bit about Ron's. He is the chief food sharer at Bon Appetit, a company that unites people over food. How's that for a cool kind of a title? But most importantly, he's the host of Australia's #1 food podcast on iTunes. Now, Ron's show, you get 5,000 people listening in a day. Is that right, Ron's?
Yeah, mate, on average. Some days it's about 6,000 to 8,000, depending on people's moods, I suppose. But wow. Yeah, on average it's about 5.
So that's like 150,000 people a month?
Yep.
That's extraordinary. How long have you been doing the show for?
June 18th was when the first few episodes went live. So
wow, amazing.
Yeah,
that's extraordinary. So that's what the show's about. But you've also got a master's degree in software engineering, and an MBA in psychology, leadership, all that kind of stuff. So, but the main thing you've also done now is, because you've been so successful in podcasting yourself, you've also now starting to teach other people about podcasting. That's right, hey?
Yeah, it's been quite a twist, I suppose. But I think because of my background, it allowed me to get podcasting and the technology side of things a lot easier. Yeah.
So is that the bottom line? You need to be a rocket scientist to be able to podcast?
You need to have access to a rocket scientist. No, I'm kidding. It's easy. It's really easy, actually.
I love it. And folks, just so you know, Ron's actually coming to us live today from Goa. I think, are you still in Goa in India?
Yeah, I'm still here, and I can hear a rooster crowing on the outside.
Rooster crowing. You live in Brisbane, but you're on holidays in Goa. That's the way it goes, right?
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, listen, let's get going, folks, if we can, on this. Obviously, it's a big topic. The questions that I've got for Ronsley are ones that you've actually sent in and asked me. There's been a lot of discussion around it on blogs, on social media. So I've got that. If we've got a little bit more time, we'll also do a bit of a Q&A as well as we move towards the end there. So, again, let's just see how we go. So where I want to start, Ron, the biggest question that I've got for you, can you explain to the listeners today and myself, what is podcasting? How do you define it?
Well, for me, it's a series of audio. It's an audio series. It's a series of audio files. I mean, there is video podcast as well, but for me, it's a series of audio files that are niched onto a particular topic. And the great part about podcasting is that once you're subscribed, whenever a new episode in the series comes out, it automatically gets pushed on to the device that you're subscribed to. So for me, there used to be various ways of doing podcasting. There used to be publications. There used to be a whole bunch of different ways of actually getting the medium, I suppose, different mediums out there on a regular basis. But I think for me, the best way to explain podcast is just think of it as an audio series of episodes that go out on a regular basis.
Right, because that's how I understand as well. Like when you do a podcast, you're really doing a podcast show, and it's like a series of shows. They're timeless. You can go onto iTunes, download whichever episode you want, subscribe to them so that when there's a new podcast show for the one that you're following, you can have an email that alerts you to that, all that kind of stuff. So it's really like a regular show, but it's on demand is probably the best way to describe it. Is that what you're kind of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, on demand, like nowadays, everything is on demand. And I recently read a study, AG. It was done by Edison's, if I'm correct, Edison's research. And
right.
They found out, they did a study called share of year study. So how much share of year people have, I suppose. And it's about 36% is all radio on demand, or podcasting or internet music. It's all it's taking over, and that's quite interesting.
Well, and so one of the things that I kind of find is particularly relevant about that, I find my own viewing habits of most things that are actually moving that direction as well. Like I used to have cable TV. I don't watch it anymore. I just download shows on iTunes and watch whatever show I want and pay as I want to watch that particular show. I think a lot of us are starting to work around this way again. I think one of the things that's really beneficial, though, about podcasting is also that fact that people can download it and listen to it in a range of mediums, in the car, when they're working out, can have it on in the background. They can, dedicate it and sit and listen to it. But it's very handy sitting on a plane, whatever the case may be. There's so many different, I guess, ways to be able to listen into a podcast and actually learn stuff. So whether it's a podcast about learning things or whether it's a podcast that's just purely entertaining, which obviously a lot of them are, they're everything from business to sports to health to well-being to you name it. So a very versatile kind of opportunity, or I guess medium is the best way to describe that. Hey.
Yep, absolutely, and there's a huge boom, obviously, with podcasting, and it's like you mentioned at the start. Podcasts are not new; it's been around for a while, and I think 2006 is when it started to explode. It was a tipping point, and that's why podcasting is. I love the images, AG.
So why has it become so hot? Is it because of a change in our habits? Is that what really has made it so significant?
I think so. I think our need to multitask. If we want to take the three mediums, that people try and communicate on, it's blogging, it's podcasting or audio, and there's video. And then if you break them down and you think about a blog post, generally they say between 300 to 500 words is an ideal blog post for people to read through. And even then, I mean, I sort of skim through. I'm not sure other people's reading habits, but I skim through it, and if I find it interesting, then I'll read a line, and then I'll read a paragraph, and then I'll probably read the whole article. And then video, on the other hand, as well, is between 2 minutes to 3 minutes at the most, and they has to be really engaging for you to get your message across. And then I suppose both those mediums, you got to stop what you're doing and consume that medium. But with podcasting and with audio, it's you can do a whole bunch of things, from mowing your lawn to scanning all the paperwork, I suppose, in the office and going paperless. So I actually have fans of the show that send me messages of when they listen to my show, and there's a guy that actually listens to my show while he mows his lawn every week. So he must have a big lawn.
Well, I have that as an author. I have people email me and tell me that they spend a lot of time in the toilet with me, or complaining that their wife takes me to bed, when they're reading my book. So I can understand. I get around, I'm a floozy. Anyone listening on this who knows me, they know that I'm like that. Now, I think what I take out of that, though, there's kind of been a convergence of things. It's changing trends in people. So we're changing our habits. Technology, I think podcasting has got a lot easier. And now you add to that we're also starting to get a lot more of bigger names of podcasting, so such as Ronsley Vaz, of course, and the Tim Ferrisses of the world, who have huge influence. Seth Godin did a whole program as a podcast. There's a lot more application around. So I think when the cool kids start to play, other people sit up and take notice as well. So it's a little bit of a mix of all of those things rolled into one.
Well, one of the things, AG, is that podcasting. Seth Godin called it in a blog post that he did on the 12th of November last year, so 2014. This is like not even a couple of months ago, and he blog post called "The End of Radio." And when Seth calls it, it's usually he called the end of newspapers and news and magazines and stuff like that. But I mean, it's there are right now about 250,000 podcasts on iTunes. But if
really?
That might seem a lot. But if you compare that to 500 million English language blogs and over 4 million hours of videos uploaded each month to YouTube, podcasting is not even like the small slice of the pie. So it's going to grow, it's going to explode. And obviously the ones that get in early are the ones that hopefully ride that wave of growth.
So the moral to that story then is obviously it's a really good time to be thinking about doing a podcast. Yeah. I know that I am, purely because of all the stuff that is happening around the place and the interest and the information. And I even find, though, in my own work, people are asking me on a regular basis, have you got a podcast that I can subscribe to? That now is becoming a very normal kind of conversation, such as almost as like, what's your Twitter handle, what's your Facebook address, what's your blog, now it's what's your podcast. You go, wow, okay, it's kind of interesting. Mate, can you just spend a couple of quick minutes and just tell us how you learnt to podcast yourself?
Well, as most people know, I did the KPI incubator program, and I was probably one of the very, very few people that got into the KPI program with no business in mind. I didn't have a business when I started, and along the way, I was like, all right, I'm starting this business. How do I get the traction that I want for people? Obviously, one of the things is that it's a new business, and you want to raise your profile. Otherwise, everything else is like a moot point, right?
Right. What was your business then?
So a personal chef. I was starting a personal chefing business, and I wanted to change the way Australia saw food. And then I thought, well, if my business is focusing on the high performing individuals of Australia, which obviously are the ones who affect change and the ones that everyone looks up to, change status quos and challenge them. How do I get to people that are just everyday people that are traveling to work and on the train and on the bus and I looked at all my different options, and podcasting was the one that just appealed. I was scared at start. I didn't know what my voice would sound like. I still find it weird to listen to myself, but I started to do some research, and I realized that I was getting a lot of the concepts a lot quicker. So it took me about 2 months to get from concept to actually launch a podcast. And Yeah, that's really what I did. All the information. The great thing is that if you want to learn the podcast, all the information is available online. It's like there's loads of information. You just have to type um, how to learn the podcast.
And learn how to podcast, right? Of course.
Yeah.
But how did you get followers? How did you get fans? How did you get devotees? How did you get 5,000 people a day listening to your show? That to me is phenomenal, and I struggle to make that leap to think 150,000 listens. I mean, I know you're Indian and you've got a large family, but there's got to be limits.
It's my mocha skin, AG. No, I think I just so the first day it's a process. The first day when it went live, I was the next day. Sorry, I brought Rochelle into the room and I looked at the stats and I'm like, only 20 people. And I'm like, are you serious? Like 2.5 months, only 20 people? And those are probably the 20 people that actually said, dude, I've got a podcast, check it out.
Right.
But then,
and they felt sorry for you, so they kind of listened and subscribed out of pity more than anything else, right?
Yes, and they're going, all right, let's see what this dude's about and what he's talking, what's this podcasting thing all about. And then that changed to 100, and then that changed into 1,000, and then no, sorry, it changed to 100, it changed to 250, and then I got pushed on to New and Noteworthy by the end of June. And again, this is something I didn't pay attention to, which I should have.
Right.
When exactly I hit New and Noteworthy, I didn't know when that happened, but when that happened. Can you just
explain what New and Noteworthy is to people?
Sure. So New and Noteworthy is iTunes' way of helping you get exposure to your podcast. So what they do is if you've got a really cool show and you've got a bunch of followers and a bunch of listens, then they'll go, all right, we want to put this podcast in the limelight, and they'll put you in the top section of iTunes in New and Noteworthy. So if someone's coming into iTunes, they go, oh, okay, let me check this one out. And and it's really brilliant because with New and Noteworthy, it actually got me on that that momentum, the wave that started is when I got pushed on the New and Noteworthy.
Yeah, interesting. And then, so that was really the thing. And how did you get onto New and Noteworthy?
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, iTunes picks, and I figured over the last few months there are a few things that you got to do, and it's all about getting the right concept and getting a bunch of followers and getting the branding right and all that kind of stuff. But once you're there, you got to harness that time that you're there. So for whatever reason, we were in the top of food, so number one in food, for about 14 weeks on New and Noteworthy. And then we hit the top of health for about 10 weeks. And then the top of fitness and nutrition for, I want to say 9 weeks, but I'm not actually sure exactly how long. But then from there, iTunes decided that they wanted to put me in the banner section of iTunes for over 3.5 months. We were up there. And that was huge because there was the ABC on one side, there was Triple M on the other side, and there was Bon Appetit in the middle. And
wow, extraordinary.
Yeah.
So also, wonderful credibility that came out of that, and a bit of luck. But there's no way you would have got there if your podcast wasn't top quality, well, recorded, interesting guests, all that kind of stuff. So my intuition is obviously the fact that if you do a great podcast, you've got a far greater chance of being, made new and noteworthy, obviously, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like blogs and like videos, there's a lot of people putting out rubbish podcasts, and there's no way to sugarcoat that. Yeah, there's definitely ways to put out a great podcast, and then you get the following that comes.
We'll talk about where people go wrong in a few minutes then. Let's keep going, mate. Tell me, if you could succinctly say to everyone who's listening, what are really the big advantages of podcasting? Sell it to us. Why should we be doing it?
Cool. Well, I think multitasking is a big one, and we kind of mentioned that you kind of can do everything from the ironing, as Leanne says, to jogging and everything else. And there's no I mean, that's the one that gets mentioned the most, to be able to do a whole bunch of other things while you're consuming content or getting smarter. As for me, I mean, my road rage has gone out the window. Like I don't get road rage anymore because I'm always listening to something. And sometimes I'm just parked in the driveway and my neighbors look at me weird because why is he still in the car? But I'm just waiting for the end of the chapter.
And I think we can all relate to that, actually. Do you think, again, though, that one of the big advantages that come from it, that I kind of look at and see that, yes, people can so from the person listening is great, it's very accessible, but it's also very intimate and very personal. I think the kind of conversation, that side of it, it feels kind of calm in many respects, depending which podcast you're listening to, but it does feel personal and intimate. That's the best way I could describe it. And I wonder if that helps to build a relationship with the people that are listening.
Absolutely. Andrew, I've met a few people that have met me for the first time, and this is just weird, but they've met me for the first time and they say, "Hey, Ronsley, how's it going? How's Rochelle?" And I'm like, this is weird. But I talk about Rochelle on the show a lot. But it's funny that they kind of know me so well, and but it's something I'm getting used to. It's just different. But yes, it's definitely.
It's a funny thing too that people actually start to recognise your voice. I've had people sitting at a cafe that have turned around and asked me, "Oh, are you Andrew Griffiths? I've heard you on a podcast. Yeah. I've heard your voice." And I go, "Are you kidding me? You can identify me based on my voice." Yeah. Which is just extraordinary, that kind of connection. So, okay.
And
there's lots of advantages. We all kind of agree with the fact that there's lots of advantages. Certainly it's hot. It's an up and coming thing. There's only, a gazillion of them out there, but a lot of them are bad. But you're saying that really the timing is really now is the time to be doing a podcast if you're thinking about doing it before there's 5 billion people doing it. For people that are, entrepreneurs, business owners out there, educators, whoever's on the line, I mean, how do they know if it's the right medium for their audience? That's a tough question, but I'd be really interested in what your thoughts are on that.
Well, for me, I think any business owner that, if you're niched in any respect, podcasting is the medium for you. This is not for owners that want, I suppose, all the car owners in Australia. This is for the business owner that wants all the car owners that adore their 1980 Chevy Corvette, as an example.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that's my view on medium, on whether it's the right medium for you, and also the fact that there's so many low barriers to entry is also makes it kind of suitable.
What do you mean by that? It's cheap for people to podcast and cheap for the audience to listen to it?
It's free. It's free for the audience to listen to it. It gets pushed onto people's phones or devices when a new episode comes out. So it's not like they're looking for it on a regular basis. It's not like they got to remember to go and check in to your podcast as well. So, and it's global. Like I've got.
And it's not like they've got to pay for it either, which of course, as you say, is a pretty good point, isn't it, from that perspective? But just to pull you on one thing there, which I think is really interesting, as you said, it's about if you've got a niche, it's going to work better for you. If you've got a great niche, I kind of think it's also good for those people that have got an audience that is a bit passionate about the topic. A niche that car example is a wonderful one. At the Monaro 1969 Monaro Club, who are fanatics, I would imagine, or any of those kind of specific. Their niche, the audience is passionate about it and a strong desire to learn and to talk about it. If you've got one of those audiences, and I imagine there are probably some topics that are hotter than others or more appealing than others. But I also kind of would imagine that if you're able to be able to kind of share lots of great information, but also lots of stories and have interviews with people, that would also obviously make it, that's going to work better for those kind of niched and passionate audiences. Is that right, Ronsley?
Well, absolutely. I mean, how many times, Andrew, that you're passionate about a topic and you're talking to someone at a barbecue and they're going, "Oh, come on, please stop." But when you're podcasting, you have all these people that are actually looking for you and they want to hear what you got to say. And they want to chime in as well, and they want to be able to send something back to you and say, I agree, I don't agree, and what did you think of it? Think of it this way. But they want to listen to what you have to say, and I think it allows for that to happen. The medium.
Interesting. You know, another thing that I just thought about that I really like about this is the fact that you're pretty certain that what you're going to listen to on a podcast that you subscribe to around a particular topic, you're going to be interested in, and you're going to get value out of it. Whereas so much information out there is so random. We've got to troll through Facebook, got to troll through blogs, we've got to troll through news, you've got to troll through so much stuff. I think this is this big wonderful thing. Say, for example, you want to learn how to detox. A podcast on detoxing, or if you really want to lead a healthy lifestyle around that, would be really interesting. And you're pretty well guaranteed all the information you're going to hear about on that podcast is going to be of value. And I can see why that would make it such a powerful medium.
Yep, definitely. And it doesn't matter whether you have, 5,000, 1 million, or even 20. If you have 20 loyal listeners and you're talking to them on a regular basis and they're just engaged with what you're saying, it's better than creating a random blog that people are not necessarily reading entirely and going, well, I actually connect with this, is my opinion.
That's an interesting thing I've realised in the last but probably the last 6 or 12 months. I think everyone got so obsessed about the size of their email list and the number of followers and the number of LinkedIn, connections and Twitter followers and all the rest of it. And you know what? I think it's a load of codswallop in many respects. I think it's not about the number of any of those. It's always about the quality of it. I think you're better off having 500 dedicated people or 50, as you say, 20 on a dedicated, follower or subscriber base like this thing. You are having 10,000 people who aren't engaged with you at the slightest. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more culling of lists and a lot more targeting of lists. Like I find now on my email subscribe list, the number of people who unsubscribe is very, very low. And it just tells me that they put up with me sending them stuff, and I really try to respect that relationship with them. And I think a part of that's got to come in with the same thing in terms of podcasting. You've got to really respect your audience, not waste their time, not just try and flog them stuff. It's not a platform to just get on there and make it, get a free set of steak knives with every episode. I think you've got to really respect your audience. And I think that's true in everything that we're doing, though, these days. I think we're a little bit tired of just having people ram stuff down our throat.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, Ron. Tell me, how complicated, again, is it to become a podcaster?
Again, in my opinion, I don't think it's very complicated. I think there's a low cost to set up a broadcasting station in your home, which is, you would have been unheard of a while ago. Right. Everyone has the access to, the hardware to listen to it for free in their pockets, and they're walking around with it. There's free access to things like radio directories like iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and all these places. But you also have free access to the listeners. But I think the complicated bit is the framework and the technical knowledge to structure and create a top-rated show. I think that is the issue. Other than that, everything else is easy. It's a low barrier. The information is freely available on the internet. You can just find it anywhere, and your audience has their mobiles in their pocket. So it's not very complicated to become a podcaster. Not at all.
Cool. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Let's go. We'll push through a few of these other questions. How often should you podcast? Is once a month enough? Do you need to do it once a week? Once a year? Make it really, really good? Should you be doing it every day? What are your thoughts on that, mate?
Well, how long is a piece of string, AG? That's a very complicated question because it depends on the concept, and okay. That's why I think that clarifying the concept of your podcast is key to creating anything of value. If you don't clarify exactly who you're after and why you're targeting those people, and what promises you're going to make to them and how you're going to deliver on those promises, everything else from that point onwards is downhill, or it's swimming upstream rather, because your branding will be off, and then from the branding you don't know how you're going to structure the framework of your podcast. Then you don't know how often to put it out. You don't know how frequent. You don't know how long it should be as well. So the concept of the podcast is so important, and anyone listening to this, the number one myth, I suppose, is that when you think about podcasting, you already have a frequency and a time frame in mind, and that's not the way to do it.
Interesting. That's really good advice, actually. And I think, again, it's that whole, you've got to take a strategic approach to doing podcasting, not just kind of have a go, maybe try it and start it a little bit, see what happens. You need to really put a bit of thought into it, really think about your audience, think about the value you're going to deliver with your podcast, the information you're going to share, and map it out. And also, you've got to know your niche. You've got to turn around and say, well, if I do a podcast every day, they're not going to listen to it. They haven't got the time. You know, my niche is probably happy with a once a month kind of podcast or whatever it may be. So take that strategic approach, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, next question. What are the most common mistakes that newbie podcasters make? And this is one that I think we're all kind of interested in.
Yeah. I think the one that I just mentioned is a big one. That you have the frequency and the length of your show pre-done in your mind, pre thought of, and that's not the way to do it. The idea that you could start a podcast from your iPhone as well. I mean, you could create the best. Might have the best quality show or best quality content, but if the audio on your show is not good, then no one's going to listen to you for longer than a few minutes, because it's going to get annoying because they're plugging you into the earbuds, right. and that's not cool. Another one that comes to mind is the idea that people don't necessarily know or care about new and noteworthy. They don't know whether they should worry about it. They don't know whether they should aim for it, and that's something that you just have to do. You have to find a way to get yourself onto new and noteworthy when you're starting a new podcast, and that's why getting it right until when you get you should get everything of your podcast right in terms of concept and recording and your shows before launching it onto iTunes, because
right get iTunes, it right. Don't
you got you got otherwise you don't qualify for new and noteworthy.
You know, something that I've really noticed, Rons, is the tiles on the iTunes page, which, promote the podcast, is, there's certainly a lot of those are just terrible. Yeah. And you look at it and go, there's no way iTunes is going to put that in a new and noteworthy if the promotional tile is terrible. Yeah. It's just not going to happen that way. So, I mean, something as simple as that. Don't be a tight ass when it comes to getting a designer to design your tile, and also your, anything around it, any of your promotion material or your page on your website. I would imagine all that stuff is vitally important, right?
Absolutely. Your branding is key. I mean, that's your branding for your podcast is as important as your branding for your business. And, it's really important. In fact, one of the other mistakes that people make, or not mistakes necessarily, but they have this idea or the myth is that they cannot get the movers and shakers in the industry onto their show if they start a podcast. It's like, oh well, he can do it, but I don't think I can. And that's the biggest myth. I mean, AG, me, and I suppose you as well. We love talking. So getting us to talk is so simple. So it's I'm sure it's the case with most other people, and I've been able to get some really cool people on the show. So that's another myth that I want to
I can't help but feel that it will get harder to get people to get the bigger names on shows. Simply, I just notice in my own little world that I'm getting asked to do podcasts more and more all the time, and it's like it can become it's an hour and a half out of your day. It does become a bit onerous at times. As much as I enjoy doing it, I think it's one of those things. But I also kind of think that the people don't want to just hear from big names. I think we want to hear from people that are interesting and have got something to say, to add some value. I mean, I look at on the line, we've got a lady called Claire Voitin, mispronounced your surname, Claire, but who runs this wonderful cafe in Melbourne and is really all around the paddock to plate kind of concept. So I look at that and go, well, I would love to hear from farmers. I would love to hear from people that are making food, that are producers, that are all those kind of things. That these people aren't famous, but they're extraordinarily interesting and probably have never been asked to be on a podcast before.
Yep. Absolutely.
So interest value is probably just as important as big names. I don't think it's all about the big names.
No, not at all. And apart from the big names, you're absolutely right. I mean, AG, there's so many people with some really cool stories, and if Claire put out a podcast, I definitely listen to it. I mean,
Me
knowing,
too. Oh, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
yeah,
So
considering,
Claire, start a podcast
yeah,
tomorrow.
do it now.
So, all right, mate. What are any other common mistakes that you want to share there before we move on?
The idea that you target your ideal customer on a podcast, there's a very big
Right.
difference between an ideal customer and an ideal listener. So that's another, I suppose, mistake that people make. That's a big one.
Can you clarify that a little bit for us? That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, so your ideal customer is someone that you want to do business with now. It's someone that if you had the choice, you would pick them, and you would have a few of them, and they would be the one that creates the least amount of problems and would be the most amount of fun to work with. Your ideal listener is your ideal customer about, I don't know, 2 years before they became your ideal customer. So how do you target the ideal listener and make them your ideal customer? Because of the content that you put out there. There's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, interesting. Okay, shall we move on?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's go.
Great. So what makes a podcaster successful? We've kind of spoken about some of the common misconceptions and some of the challenges, I guess. If you want to give perhaps a few encouraging kind of points to people that are thinking about podcasting, what would you say?
Sure. I think the first thing, and I've said this a few times through this webinar, is clarify your concept. That is absolutely key. Don't do anything until you clarify your concept. That is just, I cannot stress that enough.
So spend your time. It's like, when I give people advice about writing books, we spend a lot of time at the front end getting the idea right, getting a central question together, testing it, being clear on who your market is, all of those kind of things. And anyone who does that when they're writing a book, the book is far better. If someone just sits down to a computer screen and starts writing, it was a cold, dark night in Hell's Kitchen, the reality is that the book is never as good if they haven't done the homework. Yep. So it's a really great point. So make sure that you really spend the time strategizing, getting clear on your idea. Okay. Yep. What next?
And if you, entrepreneurs have this idea that they're built this way, that they jump off the cliff and build a plane on the way down. And I think with this one step, take as much time as you need, and everything else you can do it the entrepreneurial way, I suppose.
Because I'm going to add a little point in there. We've got a question by Jane Jackson, the lovely Jane Jackson. She's saying it's not that complicated. As it isn't that complicated, what technical knowledge and tools are needed to physically set up regular podcasts, and how do we do it? And I think that's always, everyone kind of heads straight to that part. Everyone always goes to the technology, and we'll talk about that in a second, Jane. But I agree, and I'm so pleased to hear you say this, Rons, that people, I think, spending the time to get it right has got to be emphasised, And I know that goes a bit against the grain for a lot of folks, where we live in a bit of a world of don't worry about getting it right, just get it out there and then fix it. I personally kind of like the approach of getting it right and then getting it out there. So that's really good.
Yeah, because you have that initial new and noteworthy stint in iTunes, and you want to take advantage of that. And so if you get it out and then you fix it, you might miss that wave, and you don't want to do that. So,
right.
The next thing is branding properly. As you alluded to, the tiles are just so important. For me, that is really important. And once you have the concept, you can brand properly based on that concept. Again,
so can I ask you a question in there,
sure.
Rons? Like, for example, for branding, when I'm suggesting to people that they write a book, I say to them, your book branding shouldn't actually match your business and your website. It should have standalone branding. It kind of looks weird if your book branding matches your business. Do you think your podcast branding should match your business branding?
It depends on the podcast. That's a great question, AG. But it depends on the podcast. Sometimes you have a really strong brand that you can. For example, my business is called Bon Appetit, and so is the podcast. And I've been able to get traction from that. And in fact, I've been able to get people to relate to my brand, my business brand, because of the podcasting brand. But in other cases, not the case. I mean, in other cases, it's how do you get your ideal listener and then take them and tell them that you have a business that is focused on this ideal customer. So there's no one right answer for that one, AG.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Mate, do you mind if I just stop for a second there? Just we've got a couple of questions coming. I wouldn't mind just throwing to those, and then we'll kind of keep pushing on. But from Susan Bryant, thanks, Susan. You've said, "Hey, Rons, I'm interested in the concept of getting onto NNN. I don't even know what NNN is, so I'm
Yeah,
interested in knowing
no.
about that. If you're really micro niche to have a loyal following, will this provide the kind of numbers that iTunes will attract, or do you need to be more mainstream? For example, food versus making healthy meals for time poor professionals. So, can you respond to that, mate?
Sure. First of all, the numbers is not what makes it. The loyal following is what makes it, and
Okay.
the numbers are pointless if the following is not interacting with you. And getting on a new and noteworthy definitely allows you to get both, to get a
Mm-hmm.
loyal
Oh,
following.
right. That's what NNN stands for, right? Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. So if you're new and noteworthy, for example, if you're interested in food and you're browsing iTunes and you come across, the top rated food show and you say, oh, let me check that out, you'll get a loyal follow. If they resonate with what you're saying, they get a loyal follow. And if that happens multiple times, you get I suppose you get the numbers. Getting on new and noteworthy gets you both. So it's not about being mainstream. Definitely, it's not about being mainstream, because you're going to get boring a lot quicker if you're mainstream, and you want to
Interesting.
get your loyal following to get the numbers of that loyal following.
Right.
I hope that
Okay.
answers the question, Susan.
Yeah, great. Nice, nice, nice. And the second quick question I'll get you to answer there is from the lovely Angela Cancel. Angela, your question there is, so I already have a podcast and maybe I didn't take enough time before I launched it. Naughty, Angela. Any hints for getting more followers now the podcast has been running? So I guess that's a really great question there, which is around, well, how do I make my podcast better?
Yep.
Does that mean, Ron, you've got to kind of go back and do some of the things that you're talking about now, fix up your branding, be more targeted, redefine it? Can you recover, or do you need to just kind of forget about that podcast and start a new one?
I would start a new one. I would start a new one,
Right.
and don't get me wrong, you can repurpose all your content. The content that you've created doesn't go to waste. Those could be episodes on your new podcast, but redo the podcast, get on the new and noteworthy, take advantage of that, and then that the other podcast no one's gonna find anyway. It's just it's
Right.
going to be around. It's like another blog on the blogosphere. It's just there.
Cool.
So I would do that if I were you.
Cool. Okay, great. All right, let's keep going, mate. Let's keep moving on. Technology, the big question. Everyone seems to go, that's the biggest stumbling block, is it? Could you just maybe tell us what is the technology that we actually need? Just very briefly. I don't want to go into a lot of details on this here, guys, because that's a whole webinar in itself on technology. As Ron said before, go online, do a Google search, tell me what technology I need. But I just, for those who are really new and saying, well, I want to know, what am I up for? How much will it cost me? And what do I need? Could you explain that in a couple of minutes for us, mate?
Sure. So when I started my podcast, I was really tight for money back then, and I was trying to find the best way to get everything done. So my podcasting gear, which I carried all the way here to Goa, is didn't cost me more than $183, because I bought a $3 microphone cover. But other than that, it's $183 all up, because you have your laptop, which really is your recording medium. So you record and you connect to the other people via your laptop or your computer,
Right.
or whatever it is. But one of the things that you need is obviously a microphone. Don't buy a USB microphone that just plugs into your USB, because you cannot control anything from there. You need to get your microphone that goes into a mixer. So you got to have a mixer, and that mixer needs to be able to regulate your track that is coming in and your voice that is going out.
Right.
So those are the important things that you need to have, along with a good set of headphones or earphones. So it's
really it's about the recording, the audio quality is what's important, because then it goes into the computer and it goes onto a platform, into a podcasting platform. So there's a pile of those around, but if the audio file is no good, doesn't matter how great the podcasting platform is, it's going to be hard to listen to. People are going to be a little bit, a bit distracting if they've got a strain to listen, or if it's just not not particularly, I guess easy on the ear more than anything else. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
absolutely. Your audio quality is absolutely key. You
Well,
will,
great.
I mean, no one's going to listen to you for more than a couple of minutes if your audio quality is bad. So pay attention to that. Absolutely pay attention to that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and I've just had another question in here from very cheeky Nikki Jerd, who just said, Andrew, is that an old picture of you on your Mac? Yes, it is an old picture of me on my Mac. Thank you very much, Nikki. Let's keep moving on that one if we can. Rons, what are the best podcasting platforms? And what we mean by that is, what are the sites? Well, actually, I'll let you explain it probably.
Sure.
You're better at this than me, Rons.
Yeah, so there's a variety of things that happen, and I suppose that part is not necessarily tricky, but it's a bit a roundabout way. So you create your MP3 file, which is your recording. So you've recorded your file and it's of great quality, and you have it on your laptop or your desktop. You then have to upload that to a hosting site. So you host your audio on a site that is so there's Libsyn, Libsyn, which is what I use. There's SoundCloud, and those are the two big ones. So and SoundCloud also acts as a directory. So a directory is different to a hosting platform. A directory is like iTunes, it's like SoundCloud, it's like Stitcher. So SoundCloud is the only one that hosts as well as acts as a directory. iTunes doesn't allow you to host anything on iTunes. You don't. It's only a link that you submit to iTunes, and it picks everything up from your blog.
Right. So you've got to have somewhere to host your audio file, and
Absolutely.
then iTunes. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't, because I thought you kind of had to upload your audio file to iTunes. So that's really interesting. Okay.
No, you don't. And it's like releasing a blog. So you schedule it on your blog, and that's when it goes out on your blog, and then iTunes picks it up saying, oh, there's a new podcast out, and that's when they put it onto iTunes.
I see. That's a great bit of advice there. So which of the platforms do you think is the best?
I think SoundCloud is the one that is getting most is going to grow because
Right.
it is a hosting platform as well as a directory. I use Libsyn for my MP3 hosting. I don't use SoundCloud, but I do have an account in SoundCloud, and I think that's something that I'm actually looking to move over towards at some stage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Can I just ask a couple more quick questions that have come in there? Lee Young, who's normally out surfing around this time of the day, I believe. You've got a question there, Lee, saying editing the audio can be lengthy and a little bit cumbersome, and that is a part which I think many of us would probably stumble with. Is it better to outsource the episode editing, Rons?
Well, you don't necessarily have to edit your episode if you have good audio quality. So you don't have to do much to the audio once it's produced if you do everything right leading up to recording. Initially, for my first 10 episodes, I went through the painstaking, problems of removing the ums and the ahs, but then I just made peace with my ums and ahs. It didn't become cumbersome anymore.
And just be a little bit human, I think, around it is the way to go. Okay, yeah, interesting. So I guess if you've got a lot of effects, I know that Tim Reed, when he does small business, big marketing, that there's a lot of editing, there's a lot of sound effects, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and Tim definitely gets some help in that space, which makes it really good. So I think, again, I guess it's up to you, isn't it, really? You could, but if, it's not that hard to learn how to kind of edit a top and tail bit of music as well to import a file. So, it's again one that's up to you, I guess. But a great question, Lee.
Yep.
And also Nikki Jerd there, Nikki, you're saying, just wondering regarding getting started, would you recommend to record a few episodes in advance, or would you record them as you go? What are your thoughts there, Rons?
Definitely have recorded episodes in the bank. Definitely have at least a month worth of episodes in the bank before you start anything.
Yeah, right. Cool. Okay. Yeah, great. I can imagine that takes the pressure off. I do that with articles when I write for Inc.com. I always have a few of my weekly columns, about a month's worth already preloaded, ready to go. It just kind of takes the pressure off you sitting there going, I've got to have my article done in 5 minutes. I think you do a better job that way. So Interesting. Okay. Let's keep going, Rons, if we can. where do you suggest people start? So again, we've got a pile of people listening in. Where should they start?
Clarify your concept. Definitely. That's where you
Keeps
start.
coming back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Be strategic about it. Clarify your concept. That's really the area that you've got to have.
Yep. Yeah, and then you figure out whether at that point you can then make the decision whether the podcast is right for you. There's no point going and buying the best equipment or whatever it is and schedule a whole bunch of interviews if your concept is not clear. So start with concept clarification.
Absolutely. Great. I really love the fact that you've made that a consistent message throughout today, and I think certainly some of the podcasts that I've listened to that I think are horrendous are the ones where there is no structure. It's just kind of people rambling. It's a little bit all over the place. You can tell that they've just kind of recorded last minute. The sound is no good. They're a little bit egotistical in terms of it's just kind of a couple of people just rambling, but there's no, as a listener, it would be okay if it was a fun thing, but there was no structure to it. And I found, you soon wear out of that. Something that I found kind of interesting on that as well, which I would add as a bit of advice, is to listen in on other podcasts to see what people are doing well, but also to listen to other areas where people are even doing interviews. I listen to one in particular on the ABC called the Richard Fidler Show. It's a conversation hour. If anyone wants to learn a bit about interviewing, he's one of the most extraordinary interviewers on the planet, without a doubt. So I'd kind of, I like to listen to his shows because he interviews people that often you've never heard of, or I've certainly never heard of, but his interviewing style is wonderful. He shows a lot of depth of research, etc. I think we've got to kind of become students of interviewing people. Yeah. And that leads to another little thought there. And then one of the questions we had sent in from someone else, and actually Bob Greenup has just asked it as well, is a podcast better in an interview format, or is it better solo and like one person like me just waffling on for an hour, or is it better to have an interview each week? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Rons?
Again, depends on your concept, but there's definitely advantages to having an interview type format because you build a lot of allies along the way. So every time you interview someone in your industry, you build allies, and when that happens, say for example you have a book, and for now my book is going to be released soon, and I've had about 85 guests on my show who I've had over an hour conversation with them. I could potentially say to them, here's my book, and for your people you can get 70%, 80%, 90% off Amazon if you like, or you can buy it here, or you can get it for free, or whatever it might be. But I have that rapport with these people that I've spoken to who are in my industry and resonate with what I do. So definitely interview style is
right. Yeah, really a wonderful point, Rons. Yeah. And Michelle, you've just asked what was the name of that interviewer again that I just mentioned. It's on the ABC on their website. It's called The Conversation Hour, and it's with Richard Fidler and I can't remember which ABC, but you'll find it. Conversation Hour, Richard Fidler, and he's an extraordinary interviewer. Okay, right. So we know where to start. Stay strategic. Listen, do your research, do all that kind of stuff. That's fabulous. Ron, out of interest, which podcast do you follow, and can you tell us why you follow them?
Sure. Small Business Big Marketing has got me into podcasting, and this is way before KPI. I used to listen to Timbo. It kind of got the wheels turning a bit, I suppose. And this was maybe a year and a bit ago, so at least almost 2 years ago. Right. But I listened to Tim Ferriss. It's quite interesting what he does always, because like you mentioned, he gets drunk and has conversations and they turn out to be gold most times. Yes. Dan Carlin is really good. He does a podcast. This is a very good example. He's got a podcast called Hardcore History. And right. I'm not a history fan per se, but he does such a brilliant job. And it comes out once in 4 months, an episode, but it's a long 3-hour episode that is brilliantly crafted. It's just a work of art, and it's something that you got to definitely listen to. And I'll say the name again. It's Dan Carlin, Hardcore History.
How do you spell his surname?
Carlin. Dan Carlin.
Well, a 3-hour podcast.
Yes.
Even
longer sometimes.
Really extraordinary.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Any other podcasts of mention of note or notoriety that you've listened to?
Absolutely. So the I mean, nowadays I don't get a chance to listen to as many podcasts, or I listen to too many podcasts and not particular ones, but the ones that I keep going back to are the ones that I mentioned. And Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn, and the School of
Right.
Greatness with Lewis Howes are the two other ones for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Another question that we've got in there. Bob Greenup has asked: is there any feedback on the ideal length of a podcast? What are your thoughts about that? That's an interesting question.
No, there's no ideal length. It depends on your concept. It depends on your ideal listener. Don't 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 go with a preconceived notion that you got to have your length to be 30 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or whatever it might be. It all
Right.
depends on how you clarify your concept.
Yeah, great. Okay. And Lee, you've asked here, can you do a live podcast? And I guess the answer to that is actually it's a webinar, right?
No, you can do a live. You can record. You can record it live. I mean, every podcast is recorded live, I suppose. But you can actually play your intro and outro, get it recorded while you're talking to the person, and then introduce them, and then play the outro.
But how do you broadcast it live though?
You don't broadcast it live. You can't. You don't.
No, I think that's what Lee is asking. Can you do a live podcast like a radio show?
No.
No, you can't really do that. That's really, Lee, to be honest, that's kind of what a webinar is. I guess if you wanted to make it like what we're doing here could actually be a podcast or a webinar in many respects. I guess there's a bit of an overlap, really, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, another quick question that we've got then, and we'll have to start wrapping it up a bit. Jane, you've asked a great question. What brands do you recommend for mixer and microphone, Rons?
I've got a Behringer mixer and microphone, and there are a whole bunch of different ones. But again, if you Google best microphones for podcasts, you'll get a whole bunch of microphones. But mixers, any 4-channel mixer with an XLR connection for a mic will suffice.
Right. Okay. And have you got information about that on your website at all, Rons?
Not for hardware. Again, the broadcasting message is fairly new, so I'm still getting stuff together. But
sure.
Yeah, but all that information is available online. So yeah,
easy. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, that was the next question. Really, was that where can people find out more about podcasting? And I think the bottom line is there. I'm going to talk a bit about what you offer in a second, but when the key is there is a lot of information around on Google. We can search and ask around. I know that feels like a bit of a vague kind of answer, but that's the reality of it. There's so much information out there around it, looking at what other people are doing. My advice would be you really only want to take advice though from people who are podcasters. You don't really want to take advice from people who aren't actually successful in the space. I'm often amazed at people do take advice from people that aren't successful in a certain topic. I see a lot of people offering advice on how to write a book that have never written a book. And I don't kind of get that personally. Anyway, we've got to keep moving, folks. We're almost out of time. We might not get to all of your questions. What I do want to just move through, and we might have a little bit at the end there, but I just want to say, for Rons here, obviously, Rons, what time is it? What time did you get up this morning?
Right now it's 6. It's almost 6:30, but I got up at 4 this morning.
So you got up at 4. So thank you very much for getting up at 4 o'clock. Now, you also run an online training program. Is that right? To teach people about podcasting. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, I run a training program for established businesses and high, I suppose, entrepreneurs that have got established businesses. So, and I have, it's called Broadcast Your Message. I've got about 12 people right now in my current program, and there's a one starting pretty soon, and there are a few people in that as well. So I always take a small amount of people, but it's very targeted, and you don't have the fluffing around, you don't have the wasting of time to find out exactly what you're after. Everything is done in step by step manner. Yeah.
So there's 2 options there. They can do an online program if anyone's interested, where you'll teach a group of people how to podcast, or you can do one-on-one. Is that right?
Yes, I mean there are two different versions. So there's a green room experience, which includes the 7 steps, which is on the website. So the 7 steps to broadcast your message. each of the steps have got a bunch of webinars and a bunch of really cool people that come in and do some really awesome stuff, but also coaching calls with me. And then the red carpet experience is the one above that, and that is basically everything done for you. So we do your logo, we do your artwork, we do your website, we do the first 10 shows recorded, we send you the hardware, everything is on the plate.
Wow, that's pretty wild. Okay, so if people want to find out a bit more about that, I think something you mentioned to me is that the broadcast your message, you have a special link there where they go to, and it's a bit of a questionnaire to find out a bit more about them, what they need and all that kind of stuff. That's where you like to kind of direct people to rather than just a general inquiry. Is that right, Rons?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of, I'd love to chat with you if you're, an established business and you want to get involved in the Broadcast Your Message program. There are some really cool people doing, starting their podcasts. So if you go to broadcastyourmessage.com/AG, there's a lead page. There's no other way to put it. And if you just put in your email and your name and your email address, it'll send you to a booking page, which will allow you to sort of have a chat with me for 15 minutes to book the 15-minute option. And
is there any charge for that 15-minute chat, Rons?
No. It's just
that's all right. Cool. That's nice, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that will take you to a questionnaire, so I understand about your business, so we're not wasting time on the call, talking about your business. I kind of have a good understanding. So, yeah.
Sweet. And folks, what I'm going to say, having got to know Rons in the last year or so and all the rest of it, he's not a hard sell kind of a guy. If you want to know about podcasting, honestly, take him up, have the chat with him. He'll help you. I believe that you're very, very generous with your time, but you've also got a business to run as well, Rons. For me, my little podcasting journey, I'm certainly going to use your services. I'm certainly going to get you to help me to do it, mate, because I'll spend a year fluffing around and get it wrong, whereas I'd much rather have you help me get it right from the start. So, so I really encourage everyone to, take advantage of Ron's kind offer there, and also his extraordinary knowledge, from a guy who's doing it every day and is so generous with his time, knowledge, and expertise. It's it's a really cool kind of a place to be. So, and of course, there's your general site as well, broadcastyourmessage.com. If you haven't listened to one of Ron's podcasts, go onto iTunes, download it. You interviewed me on one very kindly. If you want to hear more of my voice, you can listen to that. But there's a ton of great people that you've interviewed, talked about big things, small things, wonderful things, everything in between. We're going to wind up, folks. I like to keep these things as close to being on time as possible. Ronsley, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, your expertise, your generosity. It's been wonderful to talk to you. You and I we could talk for hours. I really appreciate it. I know everyone else listening in would really appreciate the knowledge that you've shared today as well. So thank you very much, mate.
AG, an absolute pleasure. It's awesome. It's awesome to be on, and thank you so much for the opportunity to chat.
Oh, absolute pleasure. And lots of wonderful comments. Thank you everyone who's coming saying you liked it. And I'd like to say, this is the first of these kind of webinars that I've done like this with other people. Podcasting came up as a big topic. You know what we're going to do? I'm going to do more of these kind of things. For me, a lot of my work this year is definitely going to be to start a podcast, but also, I want to be communicating more, do general interest kind of webinars. I want to, address it, find out what you guys want, so please feel free, drop us a line, add a comment on the blog. We'll make sure you get a link to the recording of this as well, so you can go back and listen to it. We'll make that freely available. I'm really about trying to give as much information back. And, for me, it's really exciting as well because I get to meet, talk with great people, share knowledge, get your feedback. All of those kind of things as well. So, and I hope that the style that we did today was good. As I say, we're using Zoom, and sometimes you got to try new things, get a bit uncomfortable, mess them up. You learn a few things along the way. And I never ever admit that I've got all the answers. I'm always trying to say, hey, we're just trying to figure it out as we go and do it better. So we'll take your feedback on board. And my advice to you, and thanks once again, Ron. So my advice to you is to try these things, get a bit uncomfortable, learn new stuff. and enjoy doing it. That really create wonderful connection with your audiences. You know, don't try and build 1 million people on your list. Build 100 people that are really connected, engaged, and be of great value to them. You know, be of interest to them. Treat them with the utmost of respect. And I tell you what, everything in your life will be better as a result of that. Have a fabulous day. See you later, folks. Be good. Thank you again, Rons. Take care.
Thanks, AJ. Bye.
Bye-bye.